Welcome to the State of Happiness. I'm your host, Leslie Juvin-Acker, Chief Happiness Officer at Leslie Inc., where we provide solutions for finding happiness for stressed, anxious, and overwhelmed senior-level managers, executives, and entrepreneurs. The State of Happiness podcast offers you conversation, inspiration, and ideas for helping you increase your happiness in the areas of your personal relationships, your career, your abundance, and your emotional well-being. So come along with us on this episode, and we'll help you get the tools, resources, and inspiration you need to help you find your own state of happiness. Are you curious about how Leslie Inc. can help you find more happiness in your life? Whether you need more happiness in your career, your abundance, your relationships, or just your emotional well-being, we've got a solution that'll help you figure out where to start. Go to our website at leslieinc.org and take our happiness assessment. In less than 2 minutes, with 10 questions, you'll find out which area of your life could use more happiness and which guide pack we can use to help get you back to your state of happiness. Thanks for joining us, happy campers. Today on the State of Happiness podcast, we have Angela Kelso with us today. She is a recipient of the work that I've been doing with Homestart Inc. here in San Diego. She's one of the mothers who experienced a lot of the benefits of the programs that are offered. And we want to welcome you to this program. So thanks for joining us today, Angela.
Oh, not a problem. Thanks for having me.
So my question is for you today is, how did you become a part of the Homestart program? Now, let me take a minute to introduce people as to how I found out about you. So I was a part of the gala committee, and we were putting together the program, and then we had a special guest speaker, one of the recipients of the benefits, the many benefits of Homestart, and you were selected to be one of the speakers for that evening. And I have to say, your message and your experience really touched us. And you told everyone, over 280 people who were there today in the gala that evening, your story. So just take a minute and tell us, how did you hear about Homestart?
Well, being in recovery and being CWS involved, I got multiple referrals for programs and, just people suggesting that I use and utilize certain programs. And so it was just brought to my attention through the program that I was actually going to, the rehabilitation program I was a part of. Mm-hmm. So I asked my social worker at the time about it, and she put in the referrals necessary on her end to get me started with Homestart.
Got you. And what was that like? Who was your first interaction with Homestart? Who did you meet, and what were the first impressions based on your experience?
Well, it was actually rather interesting. The gal that did my parent partnering rather, she and I had known each other for a long time because I had been in recovery before. So she, in her journey, went through recovery, did the necessary steps to become a parent partner, and then, by the grace of God, got assigned to me. So I felt immediately drawn in and very comfortable. I knew that if it was somebody that I related to, that I wasn't going to feel judged or anything. So I immediately felt very welcomed.
Oh, that's great. Like, take us back though, and rewind us back, because you said that you're, in recovery, and you've have experienced an addiction to drugs and domestic violence. But take us back, rewind us back to your own childhood. What were the experiences of your childhood that led you upon that path?
Well, my childhood was very dysfunctional, to say the least. Mm-hmm. When I was a little girl, I was exposed heavily to domestic violence and drug abuse myself. My mother was addicted to crystal meth, and my father was very domestically violent towards my mother,
Mm-hmm.
both physically and mentally abusive. So I wasn't given any sort of parental guidance on how to have healthy relationships, how to cope with any sort of emotions, any sort of difficult times. I didn't really have a proper guide to do any of those things in the appropriate manner.
Right. What was that like? I mean, what was like a daily, like for example, a day in the life? What was that like growing up with your parents? A mom who was an addict and a dad who was abusive. What was a normal day like for you?
Well, when I was 5, my mother had a massive stroke
Mm-hmm.
and became paralyzed on her left side. So the dynamic in my household shifted completely at that time. I was the only one home with my mom when it happened. So I kind of look at things as a blessing because I called 911 so many times. I was very familiar with how to do so.
Wow.
So I called 911 and actually saved my mom's life the day that she had her hemorrhagic stroke.
Oh gosh.
Yeah. So before that, it was very dysfunctional. It was before I went to school, so my mom had friends over during the day and the night, was stayed up all night. I remember getting woken up when I was really little multiple times throughout the night with my mom and her friends partying, and my dad getting angry because he had work the next morning. And so it was really dysfunctional. Specifically, though, it's hard to remember back other than the abuse and from the time forward after my mother having the stroke because I was so little.
Right. And then things changed at home. Your journey took on maybe more responsibility, didn't you? Do you have siblings?
Yeah, me and my sister, she's 17 months older than I am, took on the roles as the parents in the house for each other and for the chores and things like that. So we immediately had to jump into, mom roles. I would walk home from school and me and my sister would make our own lunch and we would be responsible for cleaning the house and working on our own homework and waiting for my dad to get home from work. And as soon as he got home, we would go and we would visit my mother because she was in the hospital for quite some time, and then she was in like occupational therapy place and a physical rehabilitation place, and different steps throughout her journey of recovery as far as her physical abilities. So I was then drugged through the mud to go visit my mom, and then we'd come back home and we would do the rest of our homework and then we would go to bed. So it was just really structured, but way ahead of what we should have been doing for our ages.
That must have been really hard, though, to have that kind of environment and to have been thrown into an adult role so soon, and then to see these parents that don't really have the skills, the coping skills, and not really have learned that. And you're a young mother, and you're right now a single mother, and you have so many responsibilities, because it's not easy being a mom, right? Because I've got 2 little kids, 3 and 5, and I have a lot of resources and support, but it's still hard. Like it's still really hard. And then you find yourself in your life, and you're doing what you can. But what were the situations that led you down the road to finally getting connected with Homestart and getting those resources? Because in the speech that you gave, you talked about being in a relationship with someone and not mirroring in a way your parents' relationship, and there's some domestic violence there. Can you tell us a little bit more about that?
Yeah, the father of my children, I had experimented with drugs and pretty much chosen that lifestyle as my main way of life, as far as using drugs and partying with friends and ditching school and things like that. And then I met the father of my children when I was 24.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, I was head over heels in love, quote, quote, with this guy. Had no idea what a healthy relationship looked like, but the blueprints of my brain told me that the abuse was comfortable, and that's what I knew. And because of my low self-worth at this time, because I hadn't made anything of myself, and I was, had dropped out of school, and I was using drugs on a daily basis, I allowed somebody to treat me so volatile. And I got pregnant within 5 months after meeting him.
Mm-hmm.
And we were still engaging in a lot of drug use and criminal lifestyle, and it got us both arrested when I was 5 months pregnant.
Oh, wow.
And he ended up having to go to jail and be incarcerated for a year, whereas since I was pregnant, the judge kind of was lenient with me.
Mm-hmm.
Which didn't do me any justice. I continued to use drugs and thought that I could change on my own, but I couldn't. And I had my first son positive to both methamphetamine and marijuana.
Right.
So he was removed at birth. Meanwhile, his father was still incarcerated.
Right.
So I started doing what CWS at that time asked me to do, got clean. I went to a rehab. I was maintaining normal visits with my infant son. And then their dad got released from jail when my son was 8 months old.
Right.
And we reunited. We decided that we were going to try to make this work. And when he was sober and I was sober, things were actually pretty good. But I know that neither one of us did the work on an individual basis to the core issues of what all those problems stemmed from. So we ended up falling right back into the same patterns as soon as CPS was out of our life. And so by this time, by a month after he was out of jail, I was already pregnant again. And just, 5 months after that, our case closed. And then I had my son. Everything was going great. He relapsed. I relapsed. Things are totally chaotic again, right back to where we were at in our most darkest times. And the abuse actually got worse. It was much more physical violence at a much more increased frequency. Now my kids are exposed to it. So it was really a lot of tension all the time. So CPS got involved again and removed both my kids for domestic violence and drug use.
Mm-hmm.
So I did what I needed to do, separated myself from him, got into a program in a sober living facility where they would accept children. And then I got a new place that was confidential from their father. And CWS returned my kids back to me within 3 months. So I'm not sure why they did that, to be honest. The selfish me wanted them to do that, of course, and didn't really realize that it was going to mean that I became complacent again. Because at 6 months, they closed my case out. So here I am, pregnant again. I found out through that journey of CWS that I was pregnant again. Get my kids back, and my case is closed. So now I have 2 toddlers and a baby about to be born.
Mm-hmm.
And so once my baby was born, my third son, I just felt like it was too much of a chore to drag these kids to this program every day with me, and I don't have to do it anymore, right? Because CPS isn't in my life.
Right.
So I gave myself the permission to just stop going.
Okay.
And that didn't do me any justice, obviously. I ended up isolating from the people that I was becoming more comfortable with and that I was growing relationships that are healthy with. I isolated myself from everybody in recovery, maintained a few healthy relationships in my family as far as like my sister and stuff, but I was able to lie and hide my downward spiral from her. So I didn't have any accountability factors. and I was using again, and then started engaging in criminal activity, all the things that I knew I was comfortable with and knew I was good at, you know?
Right. So my question for
So,
you is the, you were able to get yourself clean a couple of times, and what were those core emotions that you felt that made you believe that you needed to take drugs again? Like, what were you feeling?
well, I grew up in such a dysfunctional home that, I didn't learn my self-worth, my true self-worth.
Mm-hmm.
So I really didn't feel adequate in life. I feel like I somewhat have a heroism complex,
Mm-hmm.
because of me having to take care of my mother for so long and at such a young age.
Mm-hmm.
I just feel like that's what I was innate to do. Like it's what I know how to do is to take care of people. And so I tend to want to rescue people that are in need of my help, and if I'm not helping someone, I didn't feel adequate with my own, just with me.
Gotcha.
And that was coupled with, low self-worth because of now being abused for 4 years of my life. And you know what I mean? Just
Yeah.
dysfunctional relationships and drug use and never following through with any of my commitments with education and with jobs and things like that. I was never able to fulfill an obligation. And so my self-worth was just nothing. I had lost my identity so much throughout the years of drug abuse and unhealthy relationships that I just didn't even really know how else to cope with any sort of feeling. And
Right.
then on the other end of that spectrum, even when I felt happy, I felt I deserved to get high because I needed to celebrate.
Mm.
So it was such a maladaptive coping skill that I had learned on either regard of any type of emotion. So no matter where I was at on the spectrum of feelings, I didn't know how to deal with that feeling. You know what I
Right.
mean?
Right.
So
So
it
drug.
wasn't until this time in sobriety that I really did any work on my core issues. I have a sponsor who has helped me work the steps, and I had a lot of help through Homestart as well.
And what did they teach you? And what did they help you achieve at Homestart?
Well, I had a parent partner who I told you was my first contact with Homestart, who I knew through recovery, and I felt immediately like, wow, she can do something so successful in life, so can I. So she gave me hope because she knew the system, she knew where I was at in my cases and how exactly the law pertained to me and stuff. So she was able to guide me in the right direction as far as speaking to my social worker and giving me hope that it wasn't over, because the third time that I became CWS involved, which was this last time, they wanted to adopt my children out.
Mm-hmm.
And that's when I had hit my absolute rock bottom. I was faced with losing my kids forever.
Right.
So I really had no idea where to go other than just surrender, fully surrender to God and to the steps in NA, and just really humble myself and take suggestions that were given to me.
Right.
So she gave me so many suggestions on how to stay hopeful and what meetings were good. I mean, she was really a huge stepping stone in the right direction. And then I also got to have sessions with their clinician. So she's basically a psychiatrist to help me learn how to regulate my emotions. She was there to give me constructive yet gentle feedback, knowing where I was at in my vulnerability.
Mm-hmm.
So she wasn't too intense with her delivery as far as what suggestions she gave me, but she was to the point, and I knew that she had, the background to be able to say these things to me. I mean, she was very well educated, and she came from a clinical standing, and I respected what she had to say. And then the most significant service that I received through Home Start was my visit coach, Karen French.
Mm-hmm.
You know, she was an amazing support for me. She and I developed an unmistakable bond, and that obviously bled right into her bond with my children.
Mm-hmm.
She helped me hone in on all of my already existing book knowledge from parenting, right? She helped me hone in on that and help me be better able to implement it in actual situations that were with my kiddos.
Right.
So she would actually, do visits that are going to be more like real life visits versus like, oh, we're at a visitation center and you're in this one room. Like, that's not very realistic.
Right.
So we would go to the park and to Santee Lakes and things that I would want to be doing with my kids in the future.
Right.
So she helped me learn the developmental stages, what to expect out of my children for what they've been through. She is very knowledgeable on child development, so she was able to teach me how to deal with their tantrums better, showed me the benefits of positive parenting, helped me regulate my own emotions so that I could teach my kids how to regulate their emotions. I mean, she just shaped me into this well-rounded mom that I've always wanted to be,
Mm-hmm.
but I wasn't able to be because I just didn't know where to even start.
Right.
I've called her in the middle of my unsupervised visits even, once she closed me out successfully. I would call her and ask her, like, what do I do? And she was able to walk me through certain things that I just wasn't able to handle on my own,
Right.
And things that I would typically turn to drugs to cope with, she gave me an outlet, a better way.
Right.
It
sounded like a lot of these things, which, in normal situations are not that big of a deal. Like a child having a tantrum is quite normal, even a parent who is struggling through health issues. Everybody has some parent or somebody in their family struggling through health issues at one point or another in their lives, or, whatever that might be. But it sounded like these normal things were just so exaggerated and in so many ways so scary. And it was like, from the learning that you had received from your own background, that the response to that was an extreme response, like drugs or violence or abuse or something. It was just like taking something very normal and responding to it very exaggeratedly. And it sounds like you've really learned to take these normal everyday situations and put them into where they are as normal and everyday situations and not be overwhelmed by that.
Right. I don't know that there's a better way to say this other than the fact that Karen was basically gave me advice like the mom I really never had.
Ah, right.
And that's what I told her, like,
you had like a new lease on life in a way. It sounds like your own inner child got to start over.
Yeah, I always do my best to see like the good in all situations, and I have a really strong faith now. And this is really what it took for me and my children to get the help that we needed. Mm-hmm. I think all things happen for a reason. And I never knew about Home Start before this go around with CWS, and my kids are now in early developmental intervention programs that are helping them as well. Mm-hmm. And I didn't get these things offered to me ever before now. And so to see the silver lining behind all of this is that we just received all of the things that we needed to receive, this is what I needed to find Home Start. This is what I needed to find that role that I was never given as a child. This is what I was needed to grow with God, because I was never, mm-hmm. I was so spiritually broken that I had no idea where to even turn. Mm-hmm. So all of this was what I needed to really surrender. You know what I mean?
Oh, absolutely. It seems like, from what I hear, is that you really had this fresh opportunity to play a different role, and in so many ways, like the child, just being impressioned upon and trusting the people that were in the network, the Homestart network, and really allow them to guide you and not really get so caught up in your own fears. It's like you kind of handed over your fears too, and you're like, here's what scares me. How do I move forward from them? How do you see your children having changed since you've been involved with the Homestart program?
Oh, wow. Well, I mean, this could be an hour topic all on itself, but really, I mean, my oldest one, Anderson, he's 4.
Mm-hmm.
And he's been through the most, witnessed the most domestic violence, been removed from my custody now 3 times. And just a change in this last, 10 months, 7 of which I was involved with Homestart, and we had the visit coaching for 7 months. He literally was like a different kid, like
Wow.
night and day. I mean, just his respect level for women in general has increased tremendously. And I think that me being able to stand as a strong, independent woman, through the guidance that I got from Karin, as a strong mom, like, he respects me now, and then through the positive parenting, I really see how he responds well to that. And he likes to get rewards, and he works towards rewards, and he is just so much more well-rounded. Like, I'm shaping this little soul, and it's amazing to watch him grow and become a little man, it's crazy.
Well, it sounds like
I don't even know, really, I don't even think I have the words to describe it other than he's done a complete 180. Like,
wow.
literally his aggression has gone down to pretty much a normal for his age amount.
Mm-hmm.
His respect towards me and towards women in general has changed tremendously. His ability to, like, regulate his own emotions now is like night and day. His ability to stop and, like, make a sound decision and think about things. I see him, like, stopping and weighing his options. Like, is this a good choice or a bad choice, versus just making an impulsive decision without any thought, because he used to do that. He was I saw a lot of impulsivity in him, and he was just really aggressive. And so those two things together were really inappropriate. You know what I mean? And so he would just come up to me and hit me. He had no idea how to regulate his emotions.
Oh, wow.
Not a clue.
Well, I mean, we look at respect is always rooted in trust. And if he doesn't have a sense of respect, and this goes with any type of behavior, that I've seen, people who have a disrespect of authority usually don't trust authority. So we're looking at him and his own behaviors that he's gained to trust you and quote, the system, the people around him, the world around him in a different way. And the fact that you notice that this changed in such a short amount of time is a miracle, to say the least. Now, like, as you, for a mother, you have three small children. You're getting yourself back on your own feet. I'm not sure if you guys have reunited yet. I didn't catch that when I was asking more about you. But what do you plan next for yourself and your family?
Well, since I've gotten clean this time, I actually started my own Mary Kay business. I feel like being able to work from home while my children are at preschool and then kindergarten, will be most beneficial for our family dynamic to grow and to be what I want it to be.
Right.
And I'm going to use Mary Kay as my platform to become a motivational speaker.
Oh, okay.
Because I don't want other women to feel hopeless, and if they do feel hopeless, I want to give them the guidance that they could use to realize that it's never over. It's never too late to turn your life around. You know what I mean?
Right.
My kids, they're taking their time since I've been involved with the system before, so I have not reunited completely with my children, but I get overnight visits and I get to take them to school, and I got to register them yesterday for their new schools for next year because they'll be home before the summer.
Okay.
So
awesome.
It's coming up quick, and I'm just doing my best to suck in all that I can and sponge up all that I can as far as knowledge before that happens,
Right.
And And going back to what you said, I never really thought of it that way, but you said it. I couldn't have said it more perfectly myself. That they're, especially my oldest one, is really starting to trust not only me but the system. I feel like, in a way, before Home Start was introduced into my life,
Mm-hmm.
because they advocated for me too. When I wasn't able to advocate, I was still so vulnerable and weak and broken in the beginning of my process that I wasn't able to advocate properly for myself. So they stepped in and advocated for me, my parent partner and my visit coach, and advocated for my children. And so before Home Start got introduced to mine and my children's life, I feel like the system has failed us. And I feel like my kids knew that too, and you're right. Now they're starting to see that there are trustworthy people in the system, and they're seeing that I'm following through with everything that I say I'm going to do. And so then the trust is being built back up between me and my kids as well. And that really, I owe all the thanks to ultimately God, but God brought Home Start into my life.
Yeah.
I really feel like God opened the door to that program that I've been able to utilize, and it's been the most beneficial program I've ever been involved with in my entire life. And so I thank God every day for Home Start. I really do.
That's awesome. Being a mom is hard sometimes.
Yeah.
It's always okay, walk in the park. And the thing is that I empathize with you because, I've experienced my own, experience with depression and anxiety. I grew up in an emotionally violent family life. My parents were, domestic violence. They fought with each other. The police were called often. Fortunately, my mom did her very best. And my dad was, he's a good person too, but sometimes we don't learn these skills. And I think what you drive home for me personally in my own background is that these key skills, emotional regulation, like my dad would always fly off the handle. I mean, violence.
Me too. Yeah.
Shaming is a huge one. You're a bad person. Wait until they find out about you, and that begins to shape your inner dialogue inside your head. And it makes you think, maybe he is right. Maybe there is something wrong with me. Maybe there's something dirty with me. My friend Peter Woodbury, he's a life coach and a psychotherapist, and he says shame is the most poisonous of all feelings because it makes you feel like you're just fundamentally not good. And
right.
I think that is a lot. And he worked a lot with the former drug addicts and recovering drug addicts, and he said shame is the root of that. And when you grow up in an environment where you feel ashamed of yourself, and then you begin to develop an internal dialogue that says you're no good, why would anybody love you or help you, you're not worthy of any help, then you wouldn't even advocate for yourself. You don't even stand up for yourself when somebody says that to you, or when you begin to self-sabotage and engage in risky behavior. And that's a slippery slope. But what's great is, and I love about your story is that, you've fallen time and time again. And there's not one person who's going to listen to this podcast that has not fallen time and time again. And there is definitely hope. And sometimes it takes an outside party to show you the way, somebody to be an example, a pattern of what trust and success looks like. And fortunately in the circumstance, Home Start was that resource for you. And now you're going to be paying it forward. Life is not always easy, and there will be challenges and there will be downtimes, and of course that's life. But my question for you is, knowing that still, what drives you today? What even though you know that this is the reality, that life is not always perfect in a walk in the park, what drives you and what keeps you going to stay on your version of the straight and narrow?
Well, I've been giving that a lot of thought, lately. And I just want my kids to know that no matter how hard it gets and no matter how many mistakes you make, you're always able to correct the mistakes. And as long as you learn from your mistakes, it was worth making it,
Mm-hmm.
I just want them to see a good example of what a strong, independent person is, and self-loving, and
Mm-hmm.
have that good inner dialogue with themselves, to where they don't fall into the same patterns that I did.
Right.
I'm hoping that I can be a preventative factor for my children for the future, to see that, although we've all had our struggles and we've directly had our struggles as a family, it doesn't have to define our position in society. Our circumstances don't ever have to define our position in society.
Mm-hmm.
And I feel like my story is going to empower my children to make good life choices.
That's awesome. And the thing is that's what's good and fortunate about this situation is that they're young and you have a lot of resources and support. It's not like Homestart's going to throw you by the wayside and say, okay, you're fixed. Yay, bye. They're going
Not at all.
They're going to be there for you. The people there are so fabulous. And it's great that you have that community, because a lot of the times, whether you have resources or not, I've coached people who've, they get in a divorce, millions of dollars in the divorce, and they're drug addicts. And so I've seen this, just because your family was poor and broke and whatever, like they're the only people who could become drug addicts. It's just not true. You could have all the resources financially in the world and still have a fundamental shame inside of you that makes you believe that you're not good enough. And it doesn't matter what kind of resources you have. It's about boosting your self-esteem and your self-worth and your self-love and giving you the tools so that life isn't so scary and overwhelming. And I think that you now, like, you have this fresh start. You have these beautiful children. I saw the pictures at Gorge. And you have a new business for yourself, an entrepreneurial one that will surely evolve as you evolve. And then you have this opportunity to spread the good news about what you've experienced and the opportunity to start again. What's going on with, just final question is that what do you want the listeners on this episode of the State of Happiness to take away? If there's one thing that you want people to remember, what do you want them to know?
Exactly what I just said, that your current circumstances don't ever have to define your position in life, and just to remember that.
Absolutely. Gosh, Angela, I have to say your story was so inspiring. I remember listening to your story at the table, and I was tearing up, and I go, dang it, Angela. But I was like, she's making me cry. But it was a really powerful one, and I have to say thank you so much for making the time to share your story with us today, and for illuminating the value that Homestart has brought to the San Diego community and to all the families. And I just have to say, God bless your children, and I can't wait to see you continue telling your story to other people, motivating them, and especially young people, that life is full of potential and there's so much more we can do with it, and that your present circumstances don't define where you are in life. So thanks for joining us. I appreciate it.
Oh, I appreciate the opportunity. Thanks for having me, and God bless you and yours as well.
Thank you.
If you are ready to find your state of happiness, then a State of Happiness guide pack will get you there. 1 state, 4 destinations. These unique one-on-one coaching packages with me, Leslie Juvin-Acker, can help you reach your goals, dramatically improve your self-confidence, and create the life and career you want. Learn more about Leslie Inc. guide packs at leslieinc.org/gethappy. Watch the informational video, select a guide pack, and change your life in as little as 1 day. It's that easy. Leave the rest to me, because I'm your guide in the state of happiness. A many thanks to you, happy campers, for joining us today on this episode of The State of Happiness. If you'd like to continue the conversation, you can join me at Twitter at Leslie Juvin, as well as follow at Leslie Inc. on Instagram, and talk with us at Facebook at Official Leslie Inc. If you enjoyed this podcast, be sure to leave us a rating and subscribe and share with a friend. As always, thanks for joining us, and remember, a smile goes a long way.